The Quetico Superior Canoe Country, wilderness highway for the French-Canadian voyageurs. Brave men with birch canoes who paddled the lakes and the running rivers, carrying trade goods and beaver pelts across the rocky portages. They swept across the border country like a summer wind and faded with the fur trade, leaving nothing but the portage trails to mark their passage. People still come to this canoe country looking for a kind of adventure that's almost gone. In spirit, they stand side by side with the old-time voyageurs. This is the story of one crew of modern voyageurs whose canoe country adventure began at the Charles L. Sommers Wilderness Canoe Base near Ely, Minnesota. Operated by Region 10 of the Boy Scouts of America, the Sommers Canoe Base is the largest operation of its kind in the world, and canoeing is the sole activity. Scout groups come from all over the United States to this base on the Canadian border. Here, they have barely 18 hours to prepare for a journey into some of the wildest. Into their quarters, the advisor was in the base director's office meeting their guide, Charlie. First step toward the wilderness, a trip to the waterfront. Boots go everywhere in this country, even in water, to protect feet and ankles from razor-sharp rocks.
Okay, gentlemen.
Everyone, advisor included, takes the swimming and swamping test.
To let you know how it feels.
Unsure swimmers are required to wear life jackets.
That's a big shot to you if you do swamp on the trail. We hope that you won't. We hope that you won't ever swamp when you're on the trail or back home. There'll be 3 men in a canoe. One man riding bow, one man riding stern, one man riding garboard.
Don, Chip, and Pete had seen a lot of scouting, but this was a new one. And that water looked mighty cold.
Oh. Okay, turn it over. Let it slide back around. Throw your paddles underneath the board, the yoke. Okay. Now the sternman and the bowman steady the canoe while the man gets in the garbage. Flat on the bottom. Right down on the bottom there. Okay, and at the same time, the bowman and the sternman just hop right in. Canoe will come up to you. It'll come up to you. Right down on the bottom. Right down on the bottom. There, now lift it up. Now, let's roll it over. There you go. There we go. Okay, we're all done.
It wasn't the last time those boots would be dripping. At the evening campfire, crews assembled to get instructions on canoe country traveling. were a lot of things to cover. Fishing, packing, wilderness courtesy, voyageur history. But it was hard to listen close when their minds were somewhere out on the trail. Somewhere.
To Burke, cut into Sunday, and over to the Meadows portages.
After the campfire, the crew worked out their journey, and Charlie told them about the country they'd be seeing.
Sturgeon went into March Lake, and the fishing there is just fabulous. What kind of fish you catch? Well, we were catching mostly walleye, a few northerns. We did, after about 2 minutes of fishing, we had our first walleye, and it's really good. You get some good fun, a lot of fish to eat. You know, it's a nice break in your working day. Okay, we've got a long trip ahead and an early start tomorrow. Let's get a good night's sleep.
A good night's sleep. Not so easy when you're on the edge of adventure. Long hours of paddling, heavy packs, tough portages. You can't help wondering how you'll measure up. It seems like dawn will never come. Then, suddenly, it's time to go. For a while, it seemed more like D-Day than the start of a canoe trip, with stacks of heavy gear to be loaded up. Life jackets had to be on at the start to make sure everyone knew how to use them. And somehow, with everyone working, the crew was finally ready to push off into the wilderness. At last, they were out on the water, starting their smooth, speedy paddle across the peaceful, sunlit waters. More or less. After a mile or so, Charlie stopped the crew to sort them out and get their life jackets stowed. It's about 6 miles from the Sommers Canoe Base to the Canadian border, but the guides say it's 12 miles for beginners. The crew's first portage at the border proved the value of the wet boot idea. The boot protects the foot protects the canoe is transportation and survival. Portaging is easy enough. 2 men take the packs and paddles. The third man lightly flips the canoe onto his shoulders, and off they go. At least, that's how it looked when the guide did it. Well, there were plenty of portages ahead to practice on. This first portage crossed an international boundary to enter Canada's famous Quetico Provincial Park. The Canadian customs officer checked them through and showed them his collection of trade beads found on the portage. Beads once used by voyageurs for the Indian trade. This was the last outpost of civilization they'd see for the next 9 days. Ahead lay more than 100 miles of lakes, and rivers, and rocky portage trails.
Rocking, is that you back there?
Muscles already beginning to ache would be called on to swing a paddle for hours on end. They were truly on their own in the wilderness. Already, the first signs of teamwork were appearing. Teamwork that would have to grow in the days ahead to match the demands of wilderness travel. For some strange reason, the paddles got lighter in the last mile of the day, and the canoes headed straight as an arrow toward the campsite. Are known for their fancy cooking. This crew started out with a genuine 4-point Hudson Bay Wilderness pizza.
For food, for raiment, for life and opportunity, for sun and rain, for water and portage trails, for friendship and fellowship, we thank thee, O Lord. Amen.
Nature's dishwasher was thorough, but the crew used soap to finish the job.
Everybody up.
Sometimes the great wilderness venture isn't a postcard vacation, but rain or shine, the crew had miles to travel. The rain was bound to pass, but it left its mark on the land. Camp that night was made on the bank of a quick-running river, which offered excellent fishing for the boys and a time and a place to recover from the rigors of the day. Supper was quiet. Everyone was tired. They seemed to be searching for strength to face tomorrow's journey. Whatever a good night's sleep didn't cure, a hearty breakfast did. The crew awoke to the certain knowledge that yesterday hadn't killed them, and the belief they could survive this day as well. As their confidence grew, the country seemed to open up and welcome them, as if it recognized their right to be there. On the fourth day out, the crew came upon one of the hidden treasures of this timeless wilderness, found on a tiny island in the middle of a lake on a stony cliff. Indian pictographs made long before the voyageurs first came. History passes slowly across the Quetico. The country has known man and canoe from ancient times.
It's a call on me of the forest in the north, that step I with the sunlight for my load. From Lake Agnes by Louisa to Canadian I will go, where you see the loon and hear its plaintive wail. And if you're thinking in your inner heart, this swagger in my chest, then
It was a happy time, yet touched with a sense of losing something they'd just begun to understand. From here, the trail turned south again toward home. The last few days flew past. The crew had become expert with their canoes, like the voyageurs of old. Each portage was easier than the last. Each load seemed lighter, except for one. The portages along the border looked like highways after coming from the north. And the crew could be forgiven if they felt a cut above the common fishermen they met along the trails. For they had traveled in the wildest of the wilderness, paddled through the hours of the day, and packed across the portages that people seldom see. And so they reached the final portage of their journey, the trail to Moose Lake and the Sommers Canoe Base. The voyage was almost over. Almost. For Chip, there was still one last adventure. So that's how one crew came back. They'd passed across the land like voyageurs of long ago, leaving nothing behind but footprints to mark their journey. The wilderness survives because few men are willing to challenge it. For those who will, the rewards are great. Not from what they find in this primitive land, but from what they can discover in their own hearts.